so there can be these varying degrees of separation in the sense of self. Now, does that sound weird? Yes, it does. But I want to give some more normal examples because I think that dissociative disorders, and now we're going to be talking about dissociative identity disorder and a disorder called other specified dissociative disorder, OSDD, and sometimes in the ICD-11 that is referred to as partial DID or partial dissociative identity disorder. Let me talk about normal variations that help make sense out of this more extreme separated sense and sense of self. And the first thing I want to talk about is ego states. All of us have ego states. It's a normal way that our self is organized. Developmentally, very young children, infants, have what are called islands of experience. Okay, they're very discrete. They have very abrupt state switches from alert to asleep, from asleep to crying, from crying to calm. And they have these very limited states that are very abrupt. And with good enough attachment, a safe enough environment, these become more and more smooth. It's like shifting gears in a car. And as you get experience, your gear shifting becomes fluid and seamless. And so you don't even notice the shift from one state to another. And there is more a response to the external environment. We all have these. Sometimes they're about roles. So at the moment, I'm in my teacher ego state role, but I also have the role of a mother and a grandmother and a friend and a colleague and a gardener and a dog owner, etc. Okay, those are all slightly different states, but they are all experienced by me as Kathy. All of those are experienced as me, myself, and mine. And you have that experience too. But sometimes we wake up in the morning and let's say we wake up and I'm agitated. That's not a normal way for me to wake up. And what do I say? I say, oh, I'm not myself today. Well, who am I if I'm not myself? And the corollary here is that this is a state, it's my state, but it doesn't really feel like mine. It doesn't feel normal to me. It doesn't feel seamless and in harmony. And so something's a little off. And so we always have experiences that are not quite fully integrated into our integrated self. Okay. So I don't feel like myself, or if we engage in a behavior, perhaps I'm generally a very calm and polite person. And if I'm rude, then I would say, oh gosh, that's not like me at all. Well, who is it like? Again, it's at the edge of my integrative capacity. And I have to bring that in and go, well, yes, Kathy, you do have the capacity to be rude under extreme circumstances. That is you. And so I begin to accept that that also is Kathy. And so we're kind of trying to gather over our lifetime all the ways of being that we have into this holding place of me, myself, and mine. This is all Kathy. So that's an ongoing process. And that's normal ego states. But with dissociative disorders, what happens is all of those things that are outside this container of me, myself, and mine don't get gathered in. And they're not just minor things, right? Like waking up in a bad mood, but they can be major, like the little girl lying on the bed, that's not my experience. So it's not in here. That's somebody else. And so we can see how the development of parts of self can occur under trauma over time. And there's another reason for this, and that is that we all are organized at a very, very primitive, basic level by innate systems that organize our behaviors. And these systems are called motivational systems. You may not have heard of that. Maybe you have. But the point is that you are already aware of attachment, and that is one of these motivational systems. You are aware of play, and that is a motivational system. You are aware of defense, as in fight, flight, freeze, and faint. That is an inborn motivational system. These are inborn tendencies to act based on how we perceive the environment. Okay. And so what we think, and this is our theory of structural dissociation that was developed between myself, Ellert Nijenhuis, and Onno van der Hart, my two Dutch colleagues. We believe that dissociative aspects of self are primarily organized by different motivational systems. And these perhaps create the natural fault lines in the sense of self. So, for example, in trauma, we have a part of the child who's trying to connect with their caregivers, but their caregivers are also abusive. They have a biological need to connect, but they also have a biological need to defend against threat with the same person. And so in this particular case, between attachment and defense, not only are the goals of the motivational systems different. In attachment, I want to be connected and love you. And in defense, I want to protect myself. I want to gain safety. And it's not safe to connect, right? So the motivations and the goals are different, but also there's a whole physiological difference between the physiology of seeking attachment and being connected and the physiology of protecting yourself when you feel under real threat. So it makes sense that perhaps these motivational systems are a way to manage this insoluble dilemma of approach avoidance with caregivers, and then it goes from there. But at any rate, what we see, again, is something much more complex in dissociative identity disorder and its correlate disorders than we see in, for example, spacing out. Because now we have different aspects of self that are not sufficiently connected. So that there is an angry Mary, and there is a little Mary, and there is a Mary who goes to work, and a Mary who wants to have parties and say, I hate having children, I hate being married, I don't want to be married, those are not my children. Of course, Mary over here has children. And the work part of Mary is saying, I don't want therapy, that has nothing to do with me, I just want to go to work. And so you can see, for example, each part has its own unique silo that has insufficient connection with other ego states or other ways of being. It's not completely without connection, but they're insufficient. And these dissociative parts, as I call them, are very, very rigid. For example, if we take little Mary, who's, say, she's 6 years old, little Mary is always 6 years old. She doesn't become 7. She's not 52 like the adult Mary is. She's always afraid, and that doesn't vary. She's always afraid. And so there is a rigidity to these parts that maintains the trauma, but it also protects, let's say, it protects the adult self, Mary, from having to deal with the trauma because it remains with the 6-year-old aspect of her. That's not me. That's little Mary's stuff. Didn't happen to me. But this rigidity prevents the normal integration of self. Normal integration would look like, in Mary's case, Mary would say, oh, that little girl on the bed, that's me. That was me. That happened to me. And that's what we call realization, which we're going to talk about in a little while. And realization is a very important part of bringing people into integration. It's an important part of working with trauma. To realize that happened to me, number one. Number two, that it's no longer happening, that it ended. And number three, that I am in the present now with that history, but also with capacity to heal. Okay, so there's now more flexibility. Because if we think about our sense of self, my sense of self runs from birth, which I don't remember, but from my birth to where I am now, 69, and most of that is experienced as me, myself, and mine. There are always little elements out there that aren't well integrated. That integration is never perfect, but it needs to be good enough. So that the 6-year-old me is experienced both as me, that's me, Kathy. So I am the same person, but I'm also really different than I was when I was 6. So we're looking at this combination of linking. That's me at 6, 12, 15, 32, etc. And differentiating. I am no longer 6. And a funny story about this is in aging. I can look in the mirror and feel a bit shocked sometimes. Like, it's not that I don't know who it is, but how did this happen? What has happened to my face and my hair? And then, it's a matter of further integrating that, yes, this is what you'll look like when you're 69 and you're no longer, 45. But it takes some work. And that integrative work is what's missing in these dissociative parts. So a client will literally look into the mirror and go, I don't know who that is. I see a stranger. I see a 6-year-old. I don't see me. I don't recognize myself. So this flexibility and adaptation of this is me across time and situations, all of it, most of it, is what is missing and what we're trying to change. So when we're talking about finally the treatment of DID or OSDD, what we're really looking at is building on all of those other things I talked about with other types of dissociation. Mindfulness, emotion regulation, distress tolerance, but just sort of nervous system regulation is one way to talk about that. Psychoeducation. And then we're really going to be looking at how to help these disparate senses of self come in together to at least be more cooperative and working together as opposed to working against each other. And we're going to be talking about that a lot. So those are the 4 types of dissociation. I know that's a long introduction, but I think it's really helpful because in clients who have dissociative identity disorder or other specified dissociative disorder, they will for the most part, have all four types of dissociation, but the most essential piece that we cannot leave out is this dissociation of self or sense of self or personality. Okay. Now, when I say sense of self or personality, those are mental representations. I can't pull out something and say, here's my personality. We often say, I have a personality. In English, that's how we describe it. I have a self. But they are not things. They're representations of our enduring ways of doing things, of our understanding of who I am. Okay. So when we think about dissociative parts of self, they are not actually different people, complete different personalities, but they are different aspects of one person. One of the best ways to describe that is it's different ways of being me, only I don't like them as me. So I'm going to call them not me. But they really are not separate entities. And I think this is where dissociative identity disorder gets a very unfair treatment, particularly in the media, because these are talked about almost as separate people within one person. And that's not how it is. There can be quite jolting discrepancies between parts, but still they are part of one self. But it is a self that is not well realized, not well integrated.